Namaste. Welcome to your yoga practice, your sadhana, your spiritual journey. Today we have a fun class planned. We're going to be looking and working the deep core of the body and the tissues that are not only located in the center of the torso, that include the diaphragm and the muscles around the internal organs, or what we call the core normally, the pelvic floor. But we're also going to be looking at where that line extends to, which is the inner thighs, the legs, and the arches. So if you have flat feet, or if you've noticed in other people their arches collapsing, this is often a kind of collapse of that core. And we'll often see people who have flat feet. I've noticed that in my own practice with clients, is that people who have flat feet will tend to have lower back pain, will tend to have pelvic floor issues, because it pulls down on their pelvis. It pulls down on the deep core line. The tissues from the deep core are being pulled down through the arches of the feet, and which tend to pull on the lower back, pull on the pelvis, and at more progressive levels, we'll start to see it kind of pulling down on the shoulders, pulling down on the head. And it's kind of like the whole internal environment, the center beam of the body that holds, let's say, a building up, or holds your house up, that beam. The core line is the beam that holds the center of the body up. And the way that we're going to be working with it in the next couple of classes is that we're going to want to lift that up and work it against gravity. And this is often, this might be a new term for you, the deep core line, or the deep front line, as it's known in the anatomy trains. But in yoga, we often work this line through the bandhas. The bandhas are energetic locks that keep the prana flowing, circulating in the body. So it's kind of like water locks, that kind of keep the water contained. It doesn't allow the water to pass through. So when we contract the pelvic floor, which is known as Mula Bandha, or the root lock, or the secondary lock, which is just above Mula Bandha in the lower belly, above the pubic bone, that's Uddiyana Bandha. So when we lock those, we're kind of keeping the charge of the energy in the body. And often we want to engage these locks as we're practicing asana, because we are moving the body, and we want to keep the energy, the warmth, the heat, the fire ignited within the body as we move. If we're moving and we start to lose the contraction of the body, then the body becomes less efficient. And then at the end of the practice, we might even feel tired or fatigued. We don't get that energizing boost from our practice that most of us should be getting when we practice yoga. Another reason for that is because we're practicing the wrong type of yoga, but that's another discussion. So we're going to really slow things down today, and the reason I want to slow things down is often when we move too dynamically, we miss a lot of the sensations. We miss a lot of the subtle sensations and the subtleties that kind of guide us into proper alignment, that guide us or that tell us whether or not we're engaging in the right or wrong way. So we're going to slow things down to create subtle body awareness, to become more and more aware of what's really going on underneath those more kind of strong, superficial, under the skin contractions. We're going to go deeper and feel, okay, what's underneath those? What are the deeper layers? What's happening on the deeper layers? So that's one thing. We're going to slow things down also to feel the engagement of this deep core line, and the engagement of the bandhas, and how to contract the bandhas in a more compassionate way. Because I think often in yoga, there's an emphasis on really toning and locking the pelvic floor. And yet to do that also cuts the kind of circulation. It's like if you clench your jaw or you squeeze your muscles, you're going to notice that the body gets tense. And that in itself is a way of kind of burning yourself out. So we want to make sure that as we're contracting Mula Bandha, the root lock, and Uddiyana Bandha, which is in the lower belly, we want to make sure that as we're locking those, as we're contracting and lifting those to seal the pelvic floor, that we're not over-contracting, that we're not cutting off the flow of circulation, the flow of prana that will naturally move in this area. So again, contracting, learning how to engage the bandhas in a more compassionate way. And we'll also notice that as we contract the bandhas, or as we just breathe and work with the core line, that we're naturally contracting the bandhas. That we don't have to do anything specific to like really lock and engage. But that through our practice, we can simply activate the core line of the body and the bandhas naturally engage. And also this is a good note because in Anusara yoga, there's, I noticed that there's not a lot of mention of the bandhas in Anusara yoga. And yet built into the principles of alignment is this principle of alignment called muscular energy. And when we engage muscular energy, for example, when we engage the core line, when we engage the inner thighs, the arches of the feet, all of that is going to lead to an engagement of Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha. So it's kind of, although we don't talk about it often in classes, it's implied. It's implied, and we actually don't need to talk about it as much because it's already there. And if you're breathing and you're contracting muscular energy, then your bandhas are activated and your body is actually moving more efficiently. And so today we're also going to learn how to properly engage muscular energy and balance that with organic energy. So muscular energy is the energy that engages the body, that draws the muscles in towards the center and up in towards a focal point in the body. And then organic energy is the opposite of that. It's kind of the radiating energy, the electrifying energy that kind of moves outwards. And if we expand too much too quickly, we tend to lose some of our engagement. So we want to be able to find a nice balance between the engagement of the core of the body, the core line of the body, and then to actively expand and find length through the body, or find expansion through the body. So we're going to begin our practice lying on the belly. And we're going to actually chant Om lying on the belly. So what you'll need is a block. So you can place your block between your feet. So you can lie it flat like that. And you'll place it between your ankles. Bring your forehead to your hands. And just making sure that the block is right between the ankles. And if you have trouble getting the top of your feet down to the ground, then you might need to lift the block on a higher level. And just to make sure it's between your ankles. So for the moment, simply watch the movement of your breath. So we're getting into the subtle sensations of the body. At the same time, as you breathe, you're calming your mind. Take deeper breaths if you feel that your mind is more scattered. Pay attention to the exhalation and really favor your exhalation here. Long, deep exhalations, feeling the softening of your abdomen, of the ribs. Feel the movement of your diaphragm as it expands when you inhale. And as it comes back to the center as you exhale. And once you have an awareness of the movement of the diaphragm, shift your awareness down to the pelvis. And relax your legs, relax your hips, and feel the movement of your pelvis as you breathe. Notice the back of the pelvis, how the tailbone lifts and lowers. Kind of pelvic tilting as you breathe. You don't have to do any movement, just watch the natural movement that's there. How your pelvis rides the wave of your breath. And if you can feel the movement of your pelvis, then see if you can go deeper into the pelvis. Notice how the pelvic floor, as you inhale, it expands like a balloon inflating. Really relax your pelvic floor, relax the genitals, relax the anus. And notice how as you exhale, the pelvic floor rises up into the belly. It's very gentle. So we're not doing any major contraction here. We're not trying to contract anything. We're just watching how the pelvic floor moves naturally as we breathe. How it balloons and expands as we inhale. And how it rises back into the body as we exhale. Towards the core, towards the belly. The diaphragm and the pelvic floor have opposing kind of actions. When we inhale, the diaphragm contracts, but the pelvic floor relaxes. And as we exhale, the diaphragm relaxes, but the pelvic floor contracts. Again, it naturally does this. It's not you doing it. It's not you trying to contract. Just notice the subtle sensations. And now hold the block and between your ankles and tuck your toes under. And don't worry, we're going to chant Om in a moment. Just want you to really feel the core line, and we're going to be chanting along this line. So let's get a good visualization, a good sense of where this line is. So the deep core line, or the deep front line, as it's known by Tom Myers, goes from the arches of the feet through the shin bones all the way up into the inner thighs, pelvic floor. So squeeze the block slightly just to get a sense of your inner thighs and the inner legs. And with the toes tucked under, curl them under and lift your knees. Now take a deep breath in, relaxing the pelvic floor. And as you squeeze the block, push your heels back. Push your heels back and feel how your belly, how the pelvic floor rises up into the belly, and even your lower belly will tend to lift a little bit in towards your spine. And then inhale, relax your knees, relax the pelvis. Keep holding the block, and as you exhale, squeeze the block and press your heels back, raise the knees. And feel how your exhale draws the lower belly in, the pelvic floor is also lifting. Inhale, relax your knees, relax the pelvis. And as you exhale, push your heels back and feel the engagement from your arches, the inner arches rising all the way through the inner thighs, pelvic floor, lower belly, all the way up, even into your heart. And inhale to relax. And one more time, exhale, press your knees back, press your heels back, but engage up through the inner thighs, pelvis. And now engage the pelvic floor, just toning it slightly so you're following that lift all the way into the belly. So the pelvic floor, that's Mula Bandha, and the lower belly, that's Uddiyana Bandha. We notice that contraction is already there even before applying it. And then inhale to relax your legs. And we'll open our practice with 3 ohms. And as you ohm, notice how the vibration of Om rises up, and you'll even feel it vibrating against the floor. But notice how it vibrates up through the pelvic floor. You can even think of it drawing from your feet all the way up into the inner thighs, pelvic floor, up through the lower belly, the center of the body, the diaphragm, and all the way to the crown of the head. The sound of Om should not be like OM, but rather ONG. So it continues, it doesn't stop at the mouth, it continues up through the crown of your head. So let's try that together. So just returning to your natural breath, visualizing that line as you exhale. That line rises up into the body, all the way to the crown of the head. And then following that line with the sound of Om 3 times, take a deep breath in. Breathe normally. And then come up to your knees. You can keep the block between your ankles. Sit on the block. And then we're just gonna kind of align the ribs with the pelvis, so that that line from the pelvic floor through the diaphragm is one straight line, so that there's a relationship, a healthy relationship between the pelvic floor and the diaphragm. So as we inhale, lift your arms up, and as you stretch your arms up, you can interlace your fingers and turn your palms towards your head, so you're not turning up, but keep the palms towards the head. And notice the more you go back, the more the ribs want to push forward. Some of us might even notice that the more we go back, the more the ribs kind of collapse in. But for the majority of us, we'll notice that the ribs tend to pop forward. So wherever you are, whether your ribs are popping forward or pulling back, just notice that for the next few breaths. Inhale the arms down, exhale, and then take a breath in to raise your arms up. Exhale the arms down, and just notice how the ribs move. So we're not trying to correct anything right now or align anything. We're just noticing what our natural tendencies are. How we tend to shift ourselves out of alignment every time we raise our arms. So think of how many times you're using your arms during the day. So now we're gonna realign. So keeping the ribs in line with the pelvis. Want to feel that the abdominals are engaged, the deep core of the body and the torso is engaged, the abdomen. The bottom ribs are drawing down towards the top of your pelvis. Keeping that, take your arms in front, interlace your fingers, and then inhale, lift your arms up. Go very slowly so that you can feel that moment where your ribs want to pop forward, or where it becomes a little bit more effortful to hug the ribs in. And this is what we want. We want to create stability in the core so that we can have that mobility in the shoulders. And the same thing in terms of the hips. When we create stability in the core, we stabilize our lower back, we stabilize the abdomen, the ribs, and that will create more mobility. That will allow more mobility in the hips. So if you have tighter hips or tighter shoulders, this type of work is really important. Inhale the arms back down. Exhale. Keep the spine long, the ribs in. Inhale, reach your arms up. Keep the ribs in, keep the ribs in, keep the ribs in. You're going to notice that you're going to start to go into the flexibility of your shoulders, right? That your shoulders will actually get to stretch. So often when we bring our arms back, keep your arms up. Often when we bring our arms back, we don't really allow our shoulders to stretch. We're just kind of stretching our stomach and crunching in the back. So now we're keeping the ribs in as we extend the arms. And then bring your arms back down. All right? So now come onto all fours, and we'll work that in downward facing dog. Spread your fingers. How many times do you do downward facing dog in a practice? And how many times do you actually think about drawing the ribs in? Because in downward facing dog, the arms are alongside the ears. So if the arms are alongside the ears, that probably means that your ribs are coming out of alignment from your pelvis. So we want to maintain that engagement. Tuck your toes, lift your knees up, and just go into your regular downward facing dog. And notice as you push your arms, push your chest back so your arms come alongside your ears, how the ribs tend to kind of fall towards the floor. So now let's adjust that. Come forward into plank, and just pause in plank for a moment. Make sure your shoulders are over your hips, shoulders are over your wrists. Tone the muscles of your legs, and without sliding your feet, engage your legs as if you're squeezing your block between your ankles. Feel the inner thighs rising into the pelvis. Draw the lower belly in. So as you're squeezing your inner thighs, you're starting to activate Mula Bandha. Exhale to feel the pelvic floor engaging. And then now bend your knees. Keep that engagement. Press your hips back, just slightly with your knees bent. Now, my shoulders, my arms are not in line with my ears just yet. Now align your rib cage with your pelvis. Think of the center of your diaphragm aligning with the center of your pelvic floor. If you engage your legs and exhale, feel the pelvic floor lifting, the lower belly lifting in towards the diaphragm in the rib cage. And then keep that alignment as you press your arms a little bit more alongside your ears. And you'll feel a deep stretch in the shoulders. But don't allow the stretch in your shoulders to move you away from your center in the core of the body. So if you start to feel that your shoulders are kind of reaching their maximum flexibility, then that's where you stay. And that would be your downward facing dog. And then you can start to straighten your legs, but maintain the alignment of your pelvis. Keep hugging your legs towards one another, lifting through the inner thighs, through the pelvic floor. Feel, you don't even have to engage the pelvic floor so much. You'll notice that as you exhale, it engages naturally, and the lower belly draws in and up towards the back of the belly button. Exhale from the pelvis, root down through your heels, and from the center of your heart, press down through your hands. But maintain all those healthy actions that we just established. And then come down and sit on your heels, take a little rest. You can sit in child's pose, rest your arms in the front. And feel the movement of your diaphragm. And then step your right foot forward. Fingertips on the floor. As you press your foot down in the front, hug the midline in a way that allows you to feel the inner thighs. And then from the arches of your feet, draw up into the core of the pelvis. So in terms of muscular energy, we say draw from the periphery into the focal point. Here the focal point is right in the pelvic floor, right in the core of the pelvis. Somewhere between the Mula Bandha and the Uddiyana Bandha. Lift your back knee, and then bring a slight bend to the back knee. Keep hugging the legs in, drawing up from the arches into the pelvic floor. Exhale to feel the lift of your belly, and bring your hands either to your knee or up to your hips. Inhale. Lengthen the spine, and as you exhale, keep the length of your spine as you draw the ribs in so that you're creating a nice connection between the ribs and the pelvis. Energy's moving up from the feet into the pelvic floor. Again, make sure that you're not hardening the muscles. This is more of a compassionate lift, so we want to still maintain our sensitivity in the body. And as the energy lifts into the pelvis, the ribs draw back and the spine lengthens. Maintaining that, inhale, lift your arms up. And again, maybe they won't go behind the ears or beside the ears. Maybe they'll go a little bit in front of the ears. Keep the arms straight. And then if you can maintain this alignment in your pelvis, start to straighten your back leg and feel the stretch right in your left hip. Don't overstretch. Muscles do tear. And then bring your hands back down. Step forward and change sides. Right foot back, knee to the ground. So again, slowing things down in order to really feel. Feel your breath. Tone the muscles of your legs as you hug in towards the midline. So you're sliding your legs in, that's like squeezing the block. And as you do that, draw from your arches up into the inner thighs, into the inner groins. Draw the inner groins into the body as you lift in the pelvic floor, lift your back knee. So feel the energy as you exhale, moving from the feet all the way up into the pelvis and even into the length of your spine. So it's like that rising up that when we were chanting Om, the movement of the energy moving up, lifting the whole core line. Bend your back knee slightly and bring your hands to your front knee or to your hips. Keep the hip creases deep so that the pelvic floor can easily lift as you exhale. And then draw the tailbone down so the flesh of your buttocks, the left buttock moves down. And keeping the back knee bent, draw the ribs in so that you're aligning the ribs with your pelvis. And you can even touch and feel on your own body, like where your alignment is. Inhale, lift your arms straight up. Again, without going so far that you push the ribs out. And this is a deep listening to the body, again, bringing a lot of compassion into the body, even in the way that we engage the muscles. And then as you exhale your next breath, keep drawing from your arches up into the pelvis, but straighten your back knee if that's available for you, without changing the alignment of your pelvis. So your pelvis stays where it is, doesn't shift, the butt doesn't stick out. Notice as you exhale that there's already that natural engagement of Mula Bandha, the pelvic floor. Deep in the pelvic floor, there's a lift. And even in the lower belly, in order to maintain the alignment of the pelvis, we have to keep the lower belly engaged. Exhale, bring your fingertips down, step forward, Uttanasana. Feel your breath. Shift the weight of your hips over the front of your feet. And then bring your hands to your hips, inhale and come up to standing. Great. So now take your left foot back. Oh, actually, let's go with the hips, the feet wide. And you can take a block in front of you. I'm really bad at remembering to take the blocks, to take the props before we actually do the pose. So feet parallel, Prasarita Padottanasana. Inhale, lengthen your spine. And then as you exhale, fold forward. And bring your fingertips to the floor. You can have your hands also on the block. But we want the legs straight. So wherever you are, make sure your spine is long and you're not like blocking your breath. And again, use the block if you need to come up to a higher point. And from here, press your feet down and gather the energy by hugging your feet in and drawing up into the inner thighs. Again, it almost naturally happens as we press the feet down and hug the feet towards one another. There's a certain lift that happens in the pelvis. So we just direct that energy into the back of the pelvis, right into the pelvic floor. And then from here, you're going to shift your hips from left to right, not bending the knees. So keep the knees straight, and you just slide the hips from side to side. Now, in working with many clients with this, in this pose, I noticed that if you have tighter hips, the movement will not be as big, right? So you might even feel like you're imagining the movement, and for that you might have to come up higher up with your hands on a block or even on the seat of a chair. Okay. As you shift your hips to the right, pause there and feel the stretch on the left inner thigh. So now we're creating more length through the core line of the body. And then shift your hips to the left and feel the lift and the stretch in your right inner thigh. And then bring your hips back to center, keeping your left hand on the block. Bring your right hand to your hip, inhale. Realign the ribs with the pelvis, pelvis with the ribs. And then twist, even turn your hips to the right. So your whole belly turns to the right. Notice as you turn how you can maybe feel more of a stretch in your left inner thigh. And then we're going to realign the pelvis here so that we maintain some kind of integrity between the legs and the pelvis. So stay in the twist in the upper body, but in the lower body, start to move away from that stretch in the left hip, in the left thigh, and turn your hips to the left. So your hips start to come back towards the center. It might take you a little bit out of the twist, that's okay, because your twist will now get stronger. Your core will have to work harder. And then reach your right arm up. Draw the lower ribs in, as they will tend to move out. Lengthen the spine. Press down from your pelvis into your feet, and then from the center of your pelvis, feel the lift of your core all the way through the crown of your head. Bring your right hand to the block. Inhale, lengthen your spine. So chest forward, inner thighs back. So we want to get a neutral lower back. And then keep the ribs in. So for those of you who are hypermobile or more flexible, you want to make sure that you're not over sticking your butt out. So draw the lower ribs in, feel the back of your body. And then as you exhale, turn your hips to the left so that you start to feel, remember when we were moving the hips side to side, you start to feel the stretch on your right inner thigh. Twist to the left. And now to bring a bit more integrity to the core, we want to find once again that muscular energy. So start to move your hips back to center, so you're turning them to the right. And you're going to start to feel the engagement in the core, so use that engagement to align the ribs and the pelvis. Keep the spine long. Twists tend to take us, twists tend to take us out of our length, so we tend to lose the length of our spine. And then lift your left arm up. So now you shouldn't feel too much of a stretch in your right leg, in the right inner thigh. At least not more than in your left thigh. So if you feel more of a stretch in your right inner thigh, that means that the hips are still turning a bit to the left. So turn them back to the right. Good, and then inhale, come back to center. Exhale and fold. And for those of you who are more flexible, you can place your head on the block. This is nice and restorative. And just enjoy the movement the sensation of movement on the inner body. So we switch between being a witness to the sensations and the movements, the waves of movement on the inner body. So we switch from that to actively participating with that movement and that engagement. Inhale, lengthen your spine. Bend your knees, walk your feet closer together, and then come up to standing. So when we become active participants with the movement of our body, we want to make sure that we're not taking over the natural flow of the body, right? So it's very easy to kind of become aware of the body, say, oh, there's movement there. Okay, I want to take charge of that movement. So we want to make sure we, again, stay in a compassionate state where we first observe what is already there, what's going on in my body, and then how can I participate to enhance what is already happening, to kind of help out, not to overtake or overhaul the whole work that's already there. So hips parallel to the front edge of your mat. Hands to your hips. And the feet are on separate tracks here. So this is kind of preparing for Prasarita Padottanasana. For Parsvottanasana. Inhale, lengthen your spine. And again, as we step one foot back, the hips tend to move away from the ribs. So bring the ribs in, and as you bring the ribs in, the pelvis will often naturally realign, and just make sure you lengthen your spine. And then from here, move your hips from side to side. So we're kind of pulling that line, that the center of the body. We can think of the center of the body as being like just this big kind of towel or tissue that's just in the center of our body. So as the hips move to the right, that tissue pulls to the right. As the hips go to the left, it pulls to the left. But at the same time, we're also exploring possibilities in the body. We're exploring this range of motion. And then come back to center. Open your arms into cactus. Inhale. And as you exhale, twist to the right. Again, watch out for the ribs. Watch out you don't overstick the butt out. Don't over tuck it either. Inhale to center. Exhale to the left. Try not to twist in your knee. Inhale. Exhale to the right. And then just breathe normally and twist side to side. Just exploring balance. You can see that your body will probably be twitching a little bit, shaking. It's trying to figure stuff out. So what we're doing is we're helping the body figure stuff out, so that when we're not paying attention, our body will know what to do. We'll know how to react, how to respond. For example, here in Canada, we're going to have winter very soon. It already snowed once this week. So now inhale, come back to center. Exhale, twist to your right. Now turn your hips to the left so that you realign your hips and you create a nice connection in the core. And you can feel Uddiyana Bandha, the lower belly. And in the pelvis, if you lift the pelvic floor, you'll already feel that there was a lift there. So you don't have to engage so much the Mula Bandha. So as you lift up through the spine, through the inner thighs, you'll feel already Mula Bandha, the pelvic floor engaging, and then the lower belly, and then stretch your arms out. Take a few breaths here. So as I was saying, here in Canada, it's going to be very slippery very soon with the ice outside. And often when we slip on ice, those who are able to catch themselves, it's because their body kind of figured out the way, like a cat, figured out we have those reflexes, and figured out how to land on our feet or how to fall without hurting ourselves. Inhale, come back to center, and then step forward and just pause in Tadasana. But for others who have not explored movement, who have not given the body a chance to kind of figure things out. When we slip, the body's like, whoa, I've never seen this before, I don't know what to do, and then it tries something, but that something that it tries does not correspond with that action, with that, it's not the right response. And because it's not the right response, we tend to hurt ourselves, we fall in a wrong way, we do some freak movement, and that freak movement does not help us. Step your right foot back. That's why movement is so important, because it teaches the body how to react, how to find balance when movement is strange. Hands to hips, and then move your hips side to side. And you'll see here, like as you move side to side, if you feel really off balance, go very slowly so that your body can catch. Your body can say, oh, okay, this is where we are, this is how we can find balance here. If you go too fast, you can see if you go too fast, your body's gonna freak out, right? Unless, of course, you're used to dancing and you're used to doing, strange movement. Your body might be a little bit more used to it and say, oh yeah, she's doing that again. Come back to center, open your arms, and then twist side to side. And you can let your hips move. So we have this thing in alignment-based yoga where we kind of keep the hips square. But it's good to free the hips from time to time, as long as you're not hurting the knees or any of the other joints above or below. So just do it very mindfully. And then twist to the left. Now, reach your arms out. Now my hips are twisting, so I want to create more core connection. So in order to do that, I'm going to turn my hips to the right. So my hips will turn parallel to the front edge of the mat. And when I do that, the core engages. My body's shaking a little bit, right? So tone from the inner arches all the way up into the pelvic floor. Feel the lift of your spine from the pelvic floor. So it's that lock in the pelvic floor and the lower belly, Mula Bandha, Uddiyana Bandha, that's going to kind of send the energy back up the spine and help you lengthen the spine. And then inhale back to center and step forward. And just feel how, like, if you stuck the ribs out, like that really feels uncomfortable, or if you were to round the back, that too is kind of weird. Like the body now is trained to hold itself up and to maintain core strength. So now come down onto all fours. Lengthen your spine, soften your upper back. And then lift your right leg up. Hug in as if you're pushing your foot, your inner heel into your invisible block, and reach your left arm up. Take a deep breath in, drawing from the periphery into the core of your pelvis, even from your hands into your core of your pelvis. And then as you exhale from the pelvis, extend back out without losing the alignment of your body. Good, change sides. Inhale, left leg up, right arm. Feel the core engagement as you draw from your feet and your arms into the core of into your pelvic floor. Activating Mula Bandha and Uddiyana Bandha, that happens almost automatically when you draw from the inner thighs into the pelvic floor. And then as you exhale, press, maintain that engagement, but reach through the bones of your body. Lengthen your spine, and then release. And now you're going to take your knees a little wider and just hips side to side, circle. Circle the other way. Just explore movement here. You can even do waves. Again, there's no kind of right or wrong, just moving, waving in all directions. Good, and then child's pose. And then we'll finish in Shavasana. So lie down on your back. And can try to manually adjust the pelvis, the flesh of the buttocks down towards your heels, and walk your shoulder blades underneath to support your upper back and the heart, and then release your arms by your sides. Feel your breath. Close your eyes and move back into the space of the witness, where you're simply witnessing the subtle movements of the body. You're witnessing, but you're also studying. This is self-study. When we just watch more passively. Feel the movement of the diaphragm. Feel how it corresponds to the movement of your pelvis and the pelvic floor. And try to relax your physical body as much as possible so that the movement is not restricted, that you're not restricting the movement. Even relax your jaw, relax your face. Relax the root of your tongue, your throat. Relax your heart. Please feel free to stay longer in Shavasana. Continue your self-study and the relaxation of your body. And if you're done your practice, you can roll to your side and come up to sitting very mindfully. We'll close our practice with one sound of Om. Bring your hands together in front of your heart in Anjali Mudra. Feeling the connection from the base of your spine all the way up to the crown of your head. The intelligence that resides within that we don't want to interfere with, we don't want to override. We want to be able to learn how to understand and witness what's happening inside and then work with what's already there to create greater integrity, greater strength. And by doing so, by working with what is already there in a very friendly manner, we cultivate this quality of compassion. We learn to listen. We learn to watch before interfering, before interacting. And that way, when we interact with our own bodies or with others, we interact with the acknowledgement that there is already greatness there. So one sound of Om, take a deep breath in. Ooh. Thanks for joining me. Breathe and be well. Namaste.